Computer. Okay, Andres, you have go ahead and you have share rights, so you can go ahead and share the presentation.
Wonderful. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
All right, great. We'll go ahead and get started then. Um, and first, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here on this Monday evening, and thank you, Lee, for organizing this. And I'm just really excited to go over this presentation with you all. Again, I'm Andres Ramos, Chair of the Democratic Party of Sacramento County, and really excited to share this information because this is one of the core purposes that the party exists, is to support candidates in terms of deciding to run and then in running, helping them get elected. And whether you yourself are someone who wants to run for office or wants to help others run for office, it's really helpful to understand sort of what the process takes for someone to run. I will say that this presentation is maybe a little different than presentations that you might see in other places. This presentation is meant to be kind of a general overview, but it does have a lot of information. So I'm not going to take a lot of time on every slide. The slides will be provided to you, and please use it as a resource of information. Always happy to answer questions after the fact, or folks can follow up with me by email, and I'm happy to delve more deeply into things. But I just want to provide a lot of information as kind of a starting point. Um, and also, this presentation gives a lot of specifics around running for local office specifically that you might not see in other presentations that might focus on other races. So again, this is Candidate 101, how to run for a local office. And so I want to start off first with some disclaimers. But actually, before jumping into that, let me also say probably the best flow is to try to get through as much of the presentation as possible and then do questions. Because if folks have questions and are doing questions kind of on every slide, it might exponentially increase the time to get through. So I would generally prefer if we could do questions a little more towards the end or after particular sections, just to make the flow a little more natural. But the first part I want to start off with is some disclaimers. I'm an attorney, so I have to make some disclaimers. Nothing in this presentation is meant to be legal advice upon which a person can rely. And this is based off of my experience in the 16 plus years that I've been involved with campaigns, involved in the Democratic Party, and as a former candidate many years ago in Elk Grove myself. I've been involved in campaigns at different levels and only once as a candidate myself. So if you get a presentation from someone else, the presentation would probably be a little different. So take everything with a grain of salt, do your own research, look up sources, and also make sure that you're finding information from other folks who may have had different experiences. Any particular legal questions or FPPC questions, I would refer you to the FPPC in terms of any actual specific legal advice. So with that, here's just a quick overview of the topics that this presentation covers. First is kind of the overview introduction of what are we talking about in terms of a local office, why consider running for local office, and then the process of deciding to run and getting started. This is something that presentations often kind of skip, and I think it's actually a really important piece, is things that you should consider before deciding to run and whether to run. And then how you sort of get started with opening a committee, fundraising, getting things going, and then talking about the sort of the mechanics of getting on the ballot, the basics of running a campaign, and then kind of at the end talking about if this is something that you or others are thinking about or might be interested in the future to run for office, what should you do now to plan ahead should you decide to want to run in the future? So let's kick it off. Introduction. So first, what are we talking about when we say a local office? So really, this is below Congress, below the legislature, really talking about offices that we typically call nonpartisan. Now, there's really no such thing as a nonpartisan office in the sense that, you know, if you get elected to a city council or a school board, even though it doesn't say Democrat or Republican next to your name on the ballot, or when you're on that board or council, doesn't say Democrat or Republican in any official way, we don't leave our values at the door when we go to the dais, right? So these offices are nonpartisan in the sense that your party affiliation isn't on the ballot, but we're still Democrats and we still live our democratic values even in local office. But they're officially nonpartisan at the local level. County, city, school districts, and special district offices are what we're talking about. So again, not going to go through every single one of these, but really this is kind of our bread and butter at the local level. And these are the offices that we have in mind. Now, the ones that we're not really talking about in terms of local office are what we would call the partisan offices. These are federal and state offices: president, vice president, senator, congressperson, governor, state senator, assembly member. There's some other sort of technical ones like superintendent of public instruction that are technically nonpartisan, also not really talking about that, and judicial offices. Um, these are offices that, of course, folks can aspire to run for, though the analysis and the path to get to them, given that they're higher level, is a little more complicated than running for local office. So this presentation is really about getting elected to local office, which may be part of your journey to eventually get to a state or federal office, though not necessary. But this presentation is focused on local. So let's delve a little more into what this looks like. I'm a visual person, so it's always helpful to look at maps. So here are our Board of Supervisor districts in Sacramento County, 5 districts for a county board, which governs the county government, and also provides municipal services in the unincorporated communities. So this is the highest level of local office, either countywide office or the Board of Supervisors. So these are pretty huge districts. So that's one level of local office. Next, we have the cities. In Sacramento County, we have 7 cities. Of course, the biggest of which is the city of Sacramento, then Elk Grove, Rancho Cordova, Citrus Heights, Folsom, and then the two tiny cities of Galt and Isleton in the South County. But delving more into that, most of our cities in our county, other than Isleton, now elect by district. So when you're running, unless you're running citywide for mayor in only 2 cities, Sacramento and Elk Grove, which directly elect the mayor, you otherwise would be running for city council for a particular district. And when I last did this presentation about 5-6 years ago, only 2 of our cities at the time elected by district, city of Sacramento and Elk Grove. Or actually, Elk Grove was had just transitioned to it. Now the other cities, other than Isleton, have all shifted to by district elections. This has made it a much more achievable opportunity for folks to get elected to city office, because running for city council in a city that has districts is far more achievable for someone as a first-time candidate than if you were running at large. So this is sort of the landscape in terms of city offices within our county among the various cities that elect by district. So that's county and city office. We also have school districts in our county. This is kind of an overview map from the Sacramento County Office of Education that shows the various school districts in our county. And you can see the listing by number in the bottom right, the legend. As you can tell, the strange thing is a number of these school districts actually cross our county lines and go into neighboring counties. But for the most part, these districts are contained within our county. The biggest of which is the Elk Grove School District, then San Juan, then Sac City Unified, Folsom Cordova, Twin Rivers, Natomas, etc. Not only unified districts, but also we have some elementary school districts that feed into unified districts, or that combine with a high school district. So lots of different districts in the school district landscape as well. I don't have a map of the community college districts, but we have Los Rios, which covers multiple counties, including a couple other ones like Sierra College and Delta College that come into our county. And of course, the Sac County Board of Education, whose entire district is coterminous with all of these school districts that it oversees. There's also special districts, and we have a lot of them. I don't have all the maps of the special districts because it's not super easy to find a really easily understandable map of each of the different kinds. But I wanted to show one example, and these are the fire districts within Sacramento County. This map, again, is itself not super precise because number 12, the Casumnes CSD, is technically not a fire district, but it's a community services district that has fire protection services in addition to park services. So it's a little kind of an asterisk. And then it shows, Folsom and City of Sacramento, who have their own fire department. So it's really fire providers in addition to fire districts. But it gives you a sense of the special districts in our county. Fire districts are one subset of those. You also have park districts, as I mentioned, community services districts. You also have water and irrigation districts, resource conservation districts, one flood control district, and of course, the biggest of the special districts in our county is SMUD, the municipal utility district. So lots of local offices to run for that deal with different issues at different levels, and different challenges in terms of getting elected to them depending on their size. So now that we've kind of looked overall at what we're talking about, why would you want to run for a local office as opposed to just run immediately for Congress, for Senate, for president? Well, here's a few reasons and why it's really critical for folks at the local level to think about running for local office. One, it's much more achievable. You can win. Much easier to get elected to a city council or a school board than running for the state legislature, running for Congress, in part because it takes less resources in terms of money and volunteers to achieve it. And you're able to reach more voters directly because the constituency is so smaller, especially when you're running in a much smaller council district, school board trustee area, special district. You can knock on the doors of your neighbors directly and reach them, whereas a congressional district, a state assembly, state senate district are huge and can be a million voters or more. And so it's much more achievable, especially if you don't have a lot of money, to get elected to a local office. Also, you can get a lot done at the local level. So many important decisions in our day-to-day lives are made at the local level. And so there's a lot that you can achieve. A lot of folks often want to run for Congress because it's the shiny, prominent thing. But you know what? If you get elected to Congress right now, you're probably not going to get much done. Not that Congress does much anyways, but especially in this current political climate. But at the local level, you can actually get a lot done that affects folks in your community day to day. And also, if one day you do want to run for higher office, whether it's the state legislature, whether it's Congress, whether it's statewide office, most folks who get to that level of office typically start at the local level and were a school board member, city council member, county supervisor, and then got elected to the legislature, and then got elected to Congress, and then got elected to statewide office, or however their path may have been. So lots of reasons why it makes sense to start local. So that's kind of the initial overview and why it makes sense to think at this level, to think local. So let's talk now about deciding to run and what it takes to get started. So first, you need to know what you can run for. What are your local districts? So you want to look up your local offices and figure out what districts you're in and which of those seats might be open. Now, you don't have to only run for a seat when it's open in the sense that the incumbent isn't running again, but that can help and that can certainly weigh into your decision making about whether to run. Now, this is where I currently live in Midtown Sacramento. These are all the folks that represent me at the local level, again, for these nonpartisan offices. There's the three countywide seats that we're all represented by in our county. Christina Wynn for assessor, Tien Ho district attorney, Jim Cooper sheriff, my county supervisor is Phil Cerna. I live in the city of Sacramento, so Mayor Kevin McCarty, council member in District 4 Phil Klukebaum, and then my school board seats, Sac County Office of Education, Bina Lefkowitz, Los Rios Community College, Deb Ortiz, Sac City School Board, Jasjeet Singh. And I've noted in here when they're going to be up, right? So if I were thinking about running for office this year, be like, well, the only seats that are up, oh, and I made a mistake about I forgot to note CERN is up this year, of course. But so I could run for assessor, for supervisor, for county office of ed, for Los Rios College Board, for Sac City School Board, and then here are the special districts on the other page, SMUD, and the American River Flood Board. The American River Flood Board just is transitioning to by-district elections, so there's going to be the seat that I'm in has not yet elected anyone, so it's going to elect someone for the first time by district in November. So it is up this year, but it doesn't yet have someone. So that gives you kind of the lay of the land of which seats are going to be up so that you know what your options are. So that begs the question, where can you look them up and find those options? So you can look up your districts on the county elections website. There's a helpful page where you can look that up. Now, I have to say the challenge, if you look it up on the county elections website, is that they don't actually tell you what the name of the elected is that currently represents you or their party registration. So you don't know if they're Democrat, Republican, something else. And they don't necessarily also tell you when that seat is up. So you do have to do a little extra research yourself. It'll just tell you the name of the districts that you're in. So you can do it that way. Or you can contact us and we can simply look it up for you and tell you. I know that makes a little extra work on our side, but unfortunately there really is no existing system that you can easily, freely look it up yourself with all that relevant information. The county website is like the best option, but it doesn't have, again, the name of the elected, their party, and what when their election cycle is if they're up. There are such equivalents for federal and state representatives, but no such thing exists at the local level. So we're happy to assist if that's something to know. So that's the first step, is knowing, well, what are my options? Who represents me currently? When is the seat up? And therefore, do I want to run for any of these, whether it's against an incumbent, whether it's going to be an open seat, etc. So then the next question is, well, should I run? And that's where I think it's really important to take a lot of time yourself to do some introspection and really weigh whether it makes sense for you to jump in. Now, a lot of these presentations, as I mentioned earlier, kind of start off with the assumption that you've decided to run, it's a go, here's how you get the thing done. As someone who's been involved in this for 15, 16 years, let me tell you, I really wish that a lot more candidates were introspective and really like weighed whether they ought to run, because there are a number of people who run for office who I'm like, maybe you shouldn't really be running for office because maybe you're not running for the right reasons. Or once you get into office, I don't know that you're putting the community's needs first. That's my editorialization. But I really want to make sure that candidates themselves are doing a little introspection. A saying that I like to say is that good candidates are 80% born and 20% made, which means the attributes that make someone a good candidate are generally something that can't be taught during the course of a campaign. It's ideally, you should be a hard worker, you should be honest, passion for public service, someone who cares about your community, all those sorts of good traits. If you don't already have them, running for office is not suddenly going to make you have them. And so a lot of the attributes that are going to make someone successful are something that you just need to be aware of. Is this something that I have? Or in you looking for candidates to recruit, even if you're not thinking about running yourself, that's something that you need to be looking for in the folks that you want to push to run for office. Because if you think, yeah, this person, maybe they're kind of lazy, maybe they can kind of fudge the truth a little bit, but you know what? I think I can change them. I can push them and make them a good, honest candidate. Yeah, probably not going to happen. So really, introspection is required, and also that sort of analysis is required in terms of who you're looking for to run for office. Because folks don't change themselves and become better just because you give them a campaign, and certainly once they get power, the real person might show themselves. So for yourself, you know yourself better than anyone else. And you need to take time to analyze whether you would be a good, successful candidate and whether you would be a good office holder. Examine that both, and only you can make that decision ultimately. But you really need to sit with that and really need to decide whether you're the best fit to run and to serve. And so, again, not to belabor the point, but I think it's really important to ask, do I want to run for office to do something or to be something? Huge difference between I want to be a school board member versus I want to improve public education, and running for school board is the means to accomplish that. May seem like a subtle difference, but that's where I tell you over the years, I think I've seen folks where I'm like, I wonder if this person ran for office because they wanted the title and the prestige of being in office. And whether it's a school board or a city council, that's going to mean that that person maybe isn't putting the needs and the best interests of the students, of the community first, if things might run into conflict with their own personal ambition, right? So I think really important, mind your motive, understand why you want to do it, and if it's the right reason, then go ahead. So, and part of it is you need to convince both yourself and others, because when you're running for office, people are often going to ask you, like, why do you want to do this? And if you don't believe the reasons you give, people can probably look right through it and see that you're not running for the reasons that you say that you're running. So putting that aside, here's some other things to consider beyond even just that baseline sort of introspection. Again, why do you want to run? As I already noted, is it to accomplish a specific policy goal? Is it to serve your ambition? Is it to be in elected office? That's the first piece that we just were kind of going over, right? The other part is electability. Can I win? Who will support me? Is this the right seat to run for, the right time to run? Because that can make all the difference. Should I wait until this is an open seat and therefore much more achievable, or should I take on an incumbent? And sometimes, and it's okay to run as an underdog, totally fine, but that's something that you need to really think about. Do I want to do the job if elected? Can I do the job well? really getting elected is half the job, maybe not even half the job, maybe it's a quarter of the job. The actual job is getting in the office and doing the job. And depending on what job it is, it can be a lot of work, right? um, School board seems like a very low level office in a lot of people's minds, but it's a lot of work. Look at what we've been having the past few weeks with some strikes happening in local districts. I can only imagine that the school board members there have had a lot to deal with in terms of, the labor negotiations, hearing from the bargaining units and the teachers who are striking, from the administration, from the community. It's probably like a full-time job, especially when things are at that level. So really think about that. Do I want to do that job and all the work that it entails, and can I do it well? Also, as I put here, do I have my shit together? It's hard to run for office if your personal life is unstable or a mess. If you're unemployed, if you're going through a divorce, if you're, facing criminal charges, I mean, probably not the time to run for office. You need stability in your financial life and your personal life, because running for office takes a lot from you. And to add that on top of whatever else you may be juggling that is difficult is not the best recipe for success, right? And lastly, can I withstand public scrutiny? Now, you should do some personal introspection again, where you need to assess both your positives and negatives and really take off the rose tinted glasses about looking at yourself in the mirror, but understand what are others who are not being generous about me going to say? And am I okay feeling that public scrutiny? When I ran for office many years ago, it was the strangest thing. People that I had never met ever in my life suddenly had really strong opinions about me, both positive and negative. And if you're thin-skinned, if you get really defensive, if that stuff bothers you, that can be tough to go through. So that's another thing to really think about. The next part, and this is somewhat rhetorical, am I qualified to run? People ask themselves that. They ask it about others all the time. And I like to make this super simple. Are you at least eligible to run? Are you motivated to run to accomplish something good in your community? Are you alive and breathing? If yes to all those three, you are qualified to run. Qualification is really like the bare minimum, right? But it's too often used as kind of a way to dissuade people from running on the basis of, well, because you didn't study urban planning and you haven't worked for a city for 10 years and you haven't kissed the ring and waited in line and done this and been part of this chamber and been part of the Rotary, you're not qualified to run for council. And it's often a fake sort of um, fake reasons that are put up as barriers to tell people why they shouldn't run. And my view of qualification is, look, as long as you have the interest and desire to do the role, you are running for the right reasons, and you can learn, that's you at least meet the minimum of qualification to run and should not hold yourself back from someone else's predetermined notions of what it means to be qualified or that you need to wait your turn. There are plenty of legitimate reasons to decide to run or not to run, but not feeling qualified is generally not one of them. Now, I think it's definitely okay to say, is there another candidate that I think is more qualified and has something better to offer? Absolutely. But to say that if I didn't check this box or check that box of personal experience or education or connection to the community, therefore I'm not qualified to run, that's something that I just really disagree with. And I think we need to get rid of that barrier because so many folks bring all sorts of different life experiences that are very valid in terms of public service. And so, again, kind of along this point, how much do you have to know? You don't have to be an expert. No one runs for the first time knowing everything, and incumbents are always going to have the upper hand because they have kind of, in a way, insider knowledge and access to information, being on the council, the board, whatever it may be. And again, requiring a certain higher level of expertise would really disenfranchise most folks from being able to run. So don't feel that you have to have that level of deep knowledge in order to run, but having a good foundation of knowledge of how that local agency works, a good grasp of the issues it's facing, knowing who the players are, and being able and willing to learn is, I think, what is needed. And really should not otherwise hold yourself back as long as you're willing and able to put in that work. Now, the next thing is understanding, again, why do you want to run and being able to explain that. Now, I'm not going to show the clip here, but I don't, do folks know who this is? Anyway,
Senator Ted Kennedy from Massachusetts, who passed away a few years ago.
Yeah,
At
so
the
this is
clinic.
that exactly. Now, the reason I put this in here, and again, I'm not going to show the clip, but when Ted Kennedy ran for president in 1980 against then sitting President Jimmy Carter, one of the things that helped to tank his candidacy was he was being interviewed by some national news station about his candidacy, and he was just asked a very simple question of, "Why do you want to be president?" And he fumbled the question. He was like he couldn't really answer it, and it became apparent that he didn't really have a good explainable reason. And it's considered kind of one of the moments that really kind of took a lot of the steam out of his candidacy. Um, and so just I wanted to use this as an example of you need to be able to explain to folks why you want to run, and it needs to be consistent with your own true felt motivations, but also it needs to be something that's understandable. And if you are not running for the right reasons, if you're not running for a reason that voters are going to understand, you're going to have a Ted Kennedy moment where folks are going to be like, "Oh, you don't know why you're running. Why should I vote for you then?" Right? So you need to understand why you're running, why you care, what you want to do if you're elected. And this is just like a funny quote that I put in here for, years ago from Alicia Keys. I like the song. You know, some people live for the fortune, some people live just for the fame, some people live for the power, some people live just to play the game. And anytime I hear this song, it makes me think of candidates because I think people are motivated for various different reasons. And there are some folks in politics because they like to play the game of politics. There are some folks who are they're there because they're seeking ambition and power. Some people like the notoriety and the fame. Some people, unfortunately, run for office because it might better their economic situation or help them get connections that lets them financially succeed in life, etc. And that's the reality, right? That's the system that we're working in. And that's not, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't run if they have that in the mix of their reasons. It's not really what I'm looking for in a candidate. But I think, again, this is why introspection matters. Why are you running? What's the good in the community that's centering your impulse to run for office? And how do you communicate that to voters? So that's why, though elementary as it seems, I think it's a really critical initial step is understanding why do I want to run? What do I offer? How do I communicate that to voters? Um, so just I think a few more slides in this section here. So after doing a lot of this analysis of kind of your own reasons, your own motivation, thinking about whether it's a fit, you also want to do some research. So again, this is going to help inform viability, whether it makes sense to run, how you go about doing it. So look at who's run and won or lost in the past election cycles. What are the trends? Do the incumbents always win? If you're running against an incumbent, has no one ever beaten an incumbent? What does it take to win? How much money have prior candidates raised? If typically the successful candidates have to raise $100,000, that's important to know because that's probably going to tell you you probably need to raise about $100,000. Again, it's not for sure, but that gives you a good indicator of what the trends have been. How many voters are in the district? The bigger the district, the more money and resources you're going to need to be competitive. What's the partisan and demographic composition? If you're a Democrat running in a district that's overwhelmingly Republican, not to say that you can't win, but that could be a harder race, or that's going to at least inform what the strategy is going to have to be in order to be successful. You can get this link here, the PDI count reports. This voter file data is free and available to see the partisan breakdown in your district. So that's a way of getting that information. Also, whose support do you need to win? So if you know who votes in the district and what your likely base is, will that bring enough votes for you to win in that district? And then also, what are the relevant issues and do I know what the job entails? So yeah, what are the issues that have been coming before the board that you're running for, the council that you're running for? Are you familiar with those issues, familiar with the budget, familiar with who the players are? So want to do your research. Now, part of where you can identify some of this information are the campaign filings. And here in the presentation are the various links. I have federal and state at the top just for good measure. But locally, the thing to know is if you're running for a city office, the place that you get the campaign filings to see the fundraising and the expenditures for candidates for city office is with the city clerk. So here are the links to each page for each city. The only one that doesn't have an online page of that is the city of Isleton. So you'd have to email the city clerk directly. For every other local office, county, school district, and special district, you go to the Sacramento County page, which is linked here as well. So that's where you can look that up. Additionally, you want to identify who the important stakeholders are. And so that means who are the elected officials, community leaders, groups in the community, of course, the Democratic Party and the Democratic clubs, organized labor, other interest groups, business groups, advocacy groups. And again, you really want to understand them not only from the standpoint of their involvement with the district or the city or the county or whatever agency it is that you're running for, but also from a campaign standpoint, these may be folks who are going to do endorsements, provide contributions, other relevant stakeholders in terms of your success, not only as a candidate, but also should you be elected, your success in terms of moving the policy that you're pushing on your elected board. And I like to say a pro tip: if in getting to meet these stakeholders, you realize that you're not a fan of them, you don't like interacting with them, that might be an indicator of, well, do you want to get elected? Because you're going to have to work with these folks regularly if you're elected. So start building relationships with them now and start getting a sense of, do I want to work with these folks? Because should you win, these are probably going to be the stakeholders that you're working with or dealing with should you be elected. Here's an example. If you're running for Elk Grove School Board, or thinking about running for Elk Grove School Board, well, you'd want to look at the Elk Grove School Board members, reach out to them, other electeds in the city of Elk Grove, on the city council, the Casumna CSD, parents, the PTAs, and the neighborhood associations in your district. Of course, the Democratic Party Sacramento County, again, this is a little outdated, the Elk Grove South County Democratic Club, which no longer exists. Organized labor, all the bargaining units, about 5 or 6 or so unions in the Elk Grove School District. You would want to reach out to them. They all are going to be very invested as stakeholders in this district. Other labor affected, the trades unions, if there's ever school construction, the Central Labor Council, other interested groups such as the Chamber of Commerce, developers and local businesses in Elk Grove. So that's kind of building out who are the stakeholders who I should be talking to early and certainly talking to through the course of the campaign or seeking their support. Now, just a shout out specifically to labor. Labor is really a key partner in the Democratic Party, and Democratic candidates and the Democratic Party ourselves, we get a lot of support, not only in terms of endorsements of our candidates, but also in terms of contributions and partnership and resources with our allies in labor. So really start off with looking at your local agency's website to find out who they have collective bargaining agreements with, who is the direct labor affected. And I would, of course, always recommend contact the Sacramento Central Labor Council and the Sacramento Sierra Building and Construction Trade Council and check out their list of affiliate unions. Recognize that not all unions are the same. Do some research before reaching out to them. Make sure you understand what its members do in your local agency or how they're otherwise affected. Now, the Sacramento Central Labor Council, there's a link that we'll provide to their list on their website that has a long list of the various labor partners that's within them. Similarly with the Sacramento Sierra Building and Construction Trades Council. But you can also just go to their websites directly. So that's a lot of the sort of background, identifying stakeholders, identifying what it takes to run. So let's say you've gone through that and you've decided that you want to run. So what are the next steps to get started? So the first and really big thing to note is you want to start early. It's pretty much always better to start early. You have more time to build relationships, seek endorsements, raise money, contact voters, and if you can get early momentum, that can help clear the field of possible opponents. It's always a good idea to start early. That doesn't mean going full speed ahead. Busiest time of the campaign is right before Election Day, but slow and steady wins the race, right? It gives you time to set the groundwork for when you will be busy down the line. And front-loading fundraising and building relationships and getting endorsements on the front end is going to make it easier to shift fully into the voter contact portion once that part gets underway. I would say, as a rule of thumb, start at least 1 year ahead if possible, especially if you plan to run for a higher level local office like mayor, city council, supervisors, or countywide office. Less necessary for school board or special district, but it doesn't hurt. So how do you get things up and rolling? The first is setting up your committee. So in order to be able to start fundraising and bring in any money, any resources for your campaign, there's two FPPC forms. Now, FPPC is the Fair Political Practices Commission, which is the agency that oversees campaign finance reporting for state and local office in California. So you'll need to file two forms to begin your candidacy for campaign finance purposes. The first is the Form 501, which is the candidate intention statement. This just is letting people know that you plan on running for office. It's not the same as actually filing to get on the ballot. That happens later, and you file it with your local filing officer. The Form 410 is what creates your committee. Your committee is the legal entity that can accept and spend money from your campaign. And so, you have to have certain stuff in the name. So last name, the office you're running for in year of election. So Ramos for City Council 2018. That can be the name of the committee. Now, you probably want to keep it a short name because that's what folks have to write out checks to, and you'll need to include the full name on your disclaimers. So what do these forms look like? Here's the Form 501, the one that I used when I ran for Elk Grove City Council years ago. And it's pretty straightforward. One page, you just put your information, what office you're running for, sign it. That's it. Pretty straightforward. The part in the middle does not apply to local candidates, so you can ignore that. The Form 410 is about 2-3 pages. And again, this is the one that I filed in 2018 in Elk Grove. And you're basically stating the name of your committee, who the treasurer is, and then what the bank is that you have your account where your campaign money is going to be put, and naming the type of committee. Pretty straightforward. Form 501 and Form 410 is how you begin your candidacy in order to start raising money and do all the things that a candidate can do. Now, as I mentioned, you have to name a treasurer. This is another really important elementary thing. You want to have a treasurer who is not only, collecting, depositing the money, cutting the checks, etc., but also keeping track and filling out the reports that have to be filed for campaign finance reporting purposes. You can have a volunteer treasurer, but it is highly, highly recommended that you get a professional treasurer. These are the top 3 professional treasurers that are typically used by Democratic candidates in Sacramento County. And the rule of thumb is when in doubt, hire it out. If you have a volunteer treasurer who is very experienced and really knows what they're doing, that's okay. But it's probably better and safer to have a professional treasurer. So these are ones, it's not a fully comprehensive list. There's others out there, but these are the 3 most common used by Democratic candidates in Sacramento County. Additionally, related to money, is you want to set up an online donation platform. So the most common that's used by Democratic candidates is ActBlue. Now, ActBlue does not operate in all local jurisdictions. I don't know why they pick some and don't do others, but if you can't use ActBlue, there's other donation platforms that you can use, such as Anadot, e-fundraising connections, etc. You just have to make sure that it's compliant with campaign finance reporting purposes. In other words, that it will collect like employer information. You have to give your employer an occupation. You have to have certain disclaimers around contributions. So some online donation platforms can't be used, but they just have to be campaign compliant. But ActBlue is the pretty standard one. Again, related to campaign finance, really important fundamental thing is you need to know your reporting deadlines and what forms have to be filed. Even if you have a professional treasurer doing it, really important as a candidate or as someone helping a candidate to know this, just to make sure that it's being done and also to have some understanding of how your campaign reports are being filed and also which campaign reports of other candidates you can pull to look at. So the 2 most likely forms that you'll encounter in terms of reporting for a candidate are the Form 460, which is the regular campaign statement, and the Form 497, which is the 24-hour contribution report. And these are reports that basically show how much money your campaign is raising, what it's spending money on, things of that nature. So it's transparency. The Form 497 is in the 90 days before the election. Anytime you get $1,000 or more in a contribution, you have to file a disclosure within 24 hours so voters know who gave a big contribution to you close to the election. Now, this is what is really helpful to know as a candidate, and this is for the upcoming elections for June and for November. This is from the FPPC website, and this shows you the timelines of when these reports are going to be due. So really helpful for you as a candidate or as someone helping a candidate to know when these deadlines are and to know what has to be reported under what threshold. And you can find this on the Secretary of State website, which we link in the slides. Here's just a quick example of what a Form 460 looks like. Again, this is from 2018. It gives kind of just an overview of the committee and the candidate, and then shows you how much was raised on the summary page or spent. And then you have the main schedules or Schedule A, which shows who contributed to the candidate, whether it's an individual, whether it's a committee, whether it's a business. And then Schedule E is where payments have been made, such as for mailers or food for volunteers or postage. So those are some of the most common things you'll see in a 460. There's many more schedules, but these are the most common. And then this is a Form 497, typically 1 to 2 pages, very short. But so in this case, received $1,000 within the 90 days before the election, so had to file a Form 497 within 24 hours to disclose that. So these are the most common forms that it's helpful to be familiar with and that your treasurer would file. So again, back on the theme of money, contribution limits. So we know that you have a committee open, you can fundraise, you can do it online on ActBlue, you have a treasurer. Is there any limit on how much you can raise? It depends on what office. So the following local offices in our county are subject to contribution limits: for the Board of Supervisors and for each of the city councils within our county. Every other local office, including the 3 county-wides, assessor, DA, sheriff, every school board, every special district board, have no contribution limits. You can accept unlimited amounts of money. Now, don't get your hopes up high. You're probably not going to get huge sums of money just because there are no limits, but for city council and board of supervisors, there are limits. Now, they go as low in the city of Galt to $100 per contributor, or Folsom, where it's 150. Those are exceptionally low, and those are set by those cities. Sacramento County Board of Supervisors and Sac City Council are more in the kind of typical range for cities, I would say. But for the other cities, they have no locally established limit. So there's a state law that was enacted a few years ago that now sets it by default at, I think, similar to what the legislature has, which is 5,900, which frankly, most candidates are not going to get anywhere near that amount from an individual contributor. So it's such a high limit that it's almost not even worth having the limit. But technically, those limits are now in place for city offices. So that's the limit of what you can receive. So let's talk about how you start receiving money. So starting early, getting your campaign committee open, getting your treasurer, getting your online contribution platform, that all indicates that starting early, you really want to start fundraising. To be successful, you need to start fundraising early. And the way you want to start doing that is get a list together of everyone you know and ask them for money. I know, pretty simple, right? But it's challenging, it's tough, and it can feel awkward to ask people for money. But literally go through your phone contacts, email contacts, any other list you have, folks you went to school with, folks you worked with, folks in the community, whatever it is. Assign a dollar amount to everyone on your list of what you think they can give and ask. If you don't ask, you won't get anything. And sometimes people will give you more or less. That's totally okay. But most of your time should be spent calling folks directly in the early stages of your campaign. It's helpful for someone to, as they say, spot you, because it can be hard to do it, and having someone to hold you accountable to make sure that you actually do the calls can be really helpful. It's good to have fundraising events. People always like to come to events and have like a thing that they feel that their contribution is giving them. But you want to avoid high cost, low yield events. You can, of course, seek financial support from PACs, from unions, from Democratic Party organizations, but those usually come later down the line. In order to show your viability, usually you have to raise like money from your own contacts early on to show folks your viability. Now, if you do give your campaign money, I would say want to make sure that you do it as a loan, which would allow you to pay yourself back if you have funds left over after the campaign. If you donate it to your campaign, you will not be able to repay yourself should you have funds left over at the end. This is a helpful chart in the fundraising world from Emily's list that shows that as the circles of benefit, the people closest to you is kind of like where you start first. You as the candidate, and then personal people in your life who want to support you because they're your family, they're your friends. It's not about politics, it's not about ideology. It's just, I like you, I support you, you're my friend, you're my brother, you're my whatever. They will give you first. Then the next step after that are people who ideologically support you. Oh, you're a progressive, you support single payer. Oh, you support affordable housing, you support, our trails, our creeks, you support public education. I'm going to give you because I agree with your ideological stances and perspectives. Next is axe to grind. Well, I don't know if I'm a huge fan of you, but I really hate your opponent. We need to oust that incumbent. I'm going to write you a big fat check. And then the last circle is those who want to bet on the winning horse. Often unions or business interests or other power players, they might have business before the agency, and so they just want to make sure that they're supporting who they think is likely going to win. And that's harder, and that they will only typically support who they see is the most viable. So really, this is kind of indicating it takes more time and more resources the further out of the circle you go to get their support, to get their fundraising dollars. So you start at the middle with your personal contacts, your ideological supporters, the axe to grind, and then the power players is kind of the typical way that is suggested. So fundraising, getting that going, what comes next? Or what comes as part of that as well, I should say, is you want to put together a team. Can't do it all alone. And as a candidate, you need to be focused on raising the funds, you need to be successful, and contacting voters are the two core things. So your team that you put together helps you be successful and helps you take care of all the other things that should not be the candidate's main focus, right? The logistics, the operational things, you need someone else to be doing that as the candidate, because your best use of time as the candidate is to be raising the funds and to be contacting voters. So I would say necessary team members, you can call it something different, but typically folks often call it like a kitchen cabinet. Those are sort of your close advisors, the folks who are kind of helping you advise and run sort of some of the day-to-day things in your campaign. They're not necessarily any sort of staff, but they could just be trusted folks that are willing to volunteer and help you sort of run and move your campaign. A campaign manager is sort of the operational person who is ensuring that the day-to-day, week-to-week is happening. And of course, your volunteers, the foot soldiers who are going to be out there helping you contact voters and do all the campaign work. Now, it's nice to have, if you have the money for it, to have paid consultants and paid staff. Less likely to have that at the local level, but certainly a possibility if the resources are there in the budget. So I'm not going to go too deep into this because I already kind of mentioned it, but the kitchen cabinet, again, is sort of close friends and supporters who help you manage the day-to-day affairs. It's often helpful to give them very discrete tasks, like maybe updating your website or social media, checking in with them regularly so that you can, people that you can throw ideas to and see kind of what they think. Really, and also ability to delegate operational tasks too. On consultants, this is something that I just really want to caution folks to be careful about because it can be very expensive to have paid consultants for certain activities. Some candidates try to hire general consultants who give them kind of overall strategic guidance and try to manage certain aspects of their campaign. It can be a money suck. I would just say it's okay to have consultants who can do certain tasks, such as a fundraising consultant or one who's doing designing your mailers or social media, as long as you can afford it, as long as you understand if it's clearly worth the benefit. But I would just caution folks because candidates sometimes dump a lot of money into consultants and it's just questionable, hey, was it really worth using your limited funds on consultants? Again, campaign staff for a local candidate probably doesn't make sense to have paid. If you're running for supervisor, if you're running for a city council where it's a higher level city council, maybe. But for school board, for park board, for a smaller city, probably not. It's probably more going to make sense to have a all volunteer campaign, and probably that's going to be the only thing that your budget can afford. If you do have a paid thing, it might only be for the month or two before the election. If you have some paid canvassers, or if you pay a campaign manager or something of that that approach. Now, do folks typically do expect you to have a campaign manager? It doesn't make sense for you to campaign manager. That's not always a paid position for a local smaller office, but really it's kind of, again, the person who provides that sort of operational drive, that operational perspective to ensure that volunteers are being managed, activities are being coordinated, things of that nature. So now let's start shifting into how you're approaching voter contact and how you're actually going to sort of win, right? You need to get access to the voter file to be able to contact voters. So it's the list of registered voters in your district taken from the official voter rolls, usually supplemented with other data. Why do you need this? Now you need to know who your voters are, how to prioritize which voters to reach with your resources, and the methods that you can reach them with. The most common options are what's called PDI, Political Data Inc. This is the standard used by most Democratic candidates in California. There's also NGP-VAN, which is primarily used by federal candidates, and it's used also in other states for local candidates. But again, PDI is our standard here. You can also buy the raw voter file data, which is the cheapest option, but the hardest to work with. So really would recommend PDI to the extent that it's in your budget. This is kind of what PDI historically has looked like. It's actually different now. I swear every election cycle, PDI changes their format. It looks generally the same, but they change the buttons and the layout. But basically, you go through here, through PDI, and you create the universe of voters that you want to reach, and then you can export the list that you then use to do door-to-door canvassing, phone banking, text banking, mailers, things of that nature. So again, not going to go through all the detail here. And as I said, PDI is likely your best option. You can reach out to PDI to ask for what it could be to have the list for your campaign. It could be several $1,000s to buy full access, or it can be a few $100s just to use it for a more limited purpose. So PDI is likely your best option for voter data, and you can reach out to them for a quote. Other options exist out there, but probably PDI is likely going to be the best. All right, so going to try to go a little faster through some of these just to not take too much time. But so now we've talked about sort of that stuff in terms of getting the campaign set up, getting your committee open, your fundraiser, doing fundraising, getting your team, getting voter data. That's all great. But first, you do need to get on the ballot. So what are the steps to get on the ballot and what you need to file? So where do you file? If you're running for city office, mayor, city council, if your city elects the city clerk or city treasurer, any city office, you go to City Hall for your city. All other offices, you go to the county elections official. And that's where you file. When do you file? The nomination period is a set number of days before the election, and it always closes 88 to 85 days or so before the election. So here's what it was for this June election. And for the, sorry, I already have some typos in here. And for the general election, it's going to open on July 13th, close August 7th. But then there's a 5-day extension period if the incumbent fails to file. It extends by 5 days to the next Wednesday. Now, the thing that I would just tell candidates is always make sure that you file your paperwork at least a day before the close of filing to give yourself enough time to resolve any potential issues that may arise when filing, such as signature verification. Signatures aren't required for every office, but for some offices it is required. And I have seen it time and time again that candidates make the mistake of waiting to file their nomination signatures or other documents on the last day, and then they end up being short 1 or 2 valid signatures, and then they scramble to get that last signature or two with just a couple hours before the filing closes, and they fail to do it, and then they don't qualify for the ballot. Do not wait until the last day to file your nomination papers. Do it at least the day before. In case anything comes up, you have at least a day to fix it. Now, I would just recommend making an appointment. During the pandemic, they started requiring appointments for candidate filing. I think it's no longer mandatory, but you can still schedule it. Most city clerks, I think, tend to do it by appointment now anyways. So just make sure that you make an appointment and that you make sure that it's not on the last day. So what do you file? Not going to go through everything here because there's a lot, but these are all the things that you file when you're getting on the ballot. Now, officially, the declaration of candidacy is what officially puts you on the ballot, that you sign and declare yourself as a candidate. If your office requires nomination petitions, you have to get those. Typically, it's 20 valid signatures, but it's only required for certain offices: county and city offices, County Board of Education, SMUD, and the American River Flood District. All the others do not require signatures. Again, do not wait until the last day. Your media sheet. This is where you put your campaign contact info for the media or the public to contact your campaign. The optional code of campaign practices has no legal requirement. Your Form 700 stating any potential conflicts of interest that you may have if there's anything that comes before you elected office. The two most important things that you file that you need to make sure to get right are your ballot designation worksheet and the candidate statement. Ballot designation worksheet is what's going to have it's what's going to put the designation under your name on the ballot. This can be really critical, and for many voters is going to be one of the only pieces of information that they see of you and can decide whether or not they vote for you. Likewise, the candidate statement, though technically optional but really necessary, is for many voters going to be the only information that they read about you. So those two pieces were really critical to do them and get them right. Now, question folks often ask is, how much do I have to pay to get on the ballot? Now, for local office, unlike state and federal office, where there's always a filing fee, for most local offices, there is not a filing fee. But for county offices, so again, assessor, DA, sheriff, and for board of supervisors, there is a filing fee. And that's because those are the only offices locally that are really considered to be full-time offices. And therefore, you have to pay a certain percentage of the annual salary as the filing fee. These are the exact numbers for assessor and supervisor. The DA and sheriff numbers are approximate because those are not on the ballot this year, so we don't have what the exact number is, but it's in that range. Some cities have a nominal, like $25 fee. It's more of a processing fee. They don't have an actual filing fee. Every other local office does not require a filing fee to get on the ballot. However, you may have to pay for the candidate statement. The candidate statement can be quite pricey. It really depends on the size of the office. Now, here's just a sample for the SCOE, the County Office of Education, this June. You can see that, for example, County Board of Education Area 1 is over $6,000. And for the other ones, it's in that same range. So it can be, but those districts are huge. If you're running for city council or school board, it's probably going to be much smaller, but it really depends. And these prices are definitely higher than they used to be years ago. So they're also seeing an increase, I guess, kind of inflation as well, right? So this is the more realistic cost for local office is the candidate statement, not so much a filing fee. So you're on the ballot. Why does it matter what your ballot designation is or the candidate statement? Keep in mind that local office is low information. Voters have very little information about who's running for local office. Many voters aren't even aware that some of these offices exist. You tell a candidate, I'm running for county supervisor. They're probably like, what's a county supervisor? Or I didn't know that we had this random park district or special district or flood district. So lots of voters, like the most that they know are the presidential candidates, maybe the gubernatorial candidates. Many of them don't even know who their congressperson is, let alone a local office. So the information that every voter does get, that they do see on their ballot, is your name, your ballot designation, your candidate statement. Every voter will get that. And so that's why having those things as much in your favor as possible can make or break your ability to win. Now, other factors that can be decisive that are often out of your control is, of course, whether or not there's an incumbent, gender or racial ethnic identity, age, ballot order, the size of the field. Because just on some of those reasons, some voters are like, well, why vote out the incumbent? I'm going to vote for the incumbent. Or, well, I want to vote for a woman. Or, well, this person is my same racial ethnic identity. I want to vote for them. Oh, this person is too young. I'm going to vote for this other person. Or, this person's first on the ballot. I'll vote for them. Voters have all sorts of weird reasons why they vote. And so keeping that in mind, it's a low information race. And so voters often act on the very little information that they have. So you want to get it, whatever that information is that gets to them, as much as possible to be as favorable to you so that you have the best shot to get their vote. So part of that, one of those pieces of information is the ballot designation. So again, these are the typically 3 words that appear under your name on the ballot. And there are several requirements. Has to be a profession, vocation, occupation. Generally speaking, you need to be paid to do the thing or to in order to claim it as your ballot designation. And there's a very limited time window for someone to challenge it or for you to challenge it of your opponents. Some designations can be red flags. If you want to say educator, you pretty much have to have a teaching credential permit. If you want to say business owner, you often have to have a business license. But for example, for myself, when I ran for the Democratic Central Committee, I was, affordable housing commissioner because I serve on the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Commission, which I'm paid a stipend to do. And so I was able to put that as my 3 words in running for the county committee. But I'm also an attorney. And so, which of course I'm paid to do, that's my profession. And so I could have put down attorney. So there's, depending on what you do in terms of a profession, occupation, vocation, is what you can put down as a ballot designation. But you might think, well, do I want to put down attorney because people don't often like attorneys? Is that going to help me as my ballot designation? But as an attorney, I do a lot of affordable housing advocacy. That's what I do with the firm that I work for. So even though I could put down attorney, maybe instead I'll say affordable housing advocate, because that actually more describes the work that I'm doing. And it's just as accurate as saying attorney, because I'm an attorney who does affordable housing advocacy. And so as long as I can establish that that's what I do, and I can provide documentation of that, and they allow me to put it down, I might prefer to say affordable housing advocate as opposed to attorney, because if that's all the information that voters get, a voter might see attorney and affordable housing advocate and say, ooh, I want to vote for the affordable housing advocate, not the attorney. I don't like attorneys. So just some of the strategic things to keep in mind in how you select a ballot designation, as long as it's something that meets the requirements. So really important to keep in mind. And here's an example of what the form has looked like. I think the form they might have even updated it in recent years, but this is the same general format where you list what you want to put down as your designation and how you justify it and the references that you provide in terms of who they can call to seek justification. The other thing is the candidate statement. Again, technically it's optional, but in reality, it's pretty much a necessity. For many voters, it's going to be the only information that they read about you. And it can be expensive to purchase, but I will just tell folks this: it is far more economical than a mailer to the same number of voters that a candidate statement can reach. And so voters often throw away the mailer much more quickly than they'll throw away the voter pamphlet that has the candidate statement. So the expensive though it is, the amount of money that you spend on a candidate statement, you cannot reach that many voters with the same amount of money through a mailer or any other means of voter contact. So it's still the most economical way of reaching every voter in your district. Now, you cannot mention partisan affiliation under state law, which I think is actually unconstitutional under the First Amendment, but no one's challenged it, neither here nor there. And you need a signed letter from any person or organization that you want to list in your candidate statement, like as an endorser. Some pro tips: listing your age on the candidate statement is optional. I tell this to young candidates who are pretty young. I would say if you're under 30 and you're running for office, omit your age, because some folks might hold it against you that you're young, and they might not want to put a very young person on there. I could also perhaps say the same thing if you're quite elderly, but just it's your own decision. But I would just say think about, you don't actually have to list your age on the candidate statement, so that's something to think about. The occupation line on the candidate statement is not as strictly regulated as the ballot designation, so it's not only limited to 3 words and doesn't require documentation. So feel free to be a little more descriptive about what your occupation is on that line. Here's an example of the candidate statement document on the left, and then on the right is what the person put together as their statement as an attachment. And again, you can see the optional age and the occupation line, and so that's kind of what it looks like. And then other few things here. The other thing that determines some of these kind of low information factors is the ballot order. As simple as that seems, for sometimes just the fact that you're higher up on the ballot can give you an advantage. So how is ballot order determined? It's determined by a randomized alphabet drawing conducted by the Secretary of State. It's a little counterintuitive. The county does its own randomized alphabet drawing, but it's not used for local candidates. It's only used for state candidates whose districts cross more than one county. So it's kind of counterintuitive that the state alphabet is used for local candidates, but the local alphabet is used only for certain state candidates. Anyways, just neither here nor there, but here is the randomized alphabet for June 2026, and that determines the ballot order. And literally, this is how the Secretary of State does the drawing. Old film canisters with letters inside, and they put it in a drum and pull it out and then list it in order, and that determines ballot order throughout the state. All right, so I'm going to try to be a little more quick because I know we're getting, I don't want to keep us here all night. So now jumping into these were all the things about getting on the ballot, getting your campaign up and going, getting those fundamentals. So now running the campaign and contacting voters. So what's going to determine if you win? These are kind of the very generic buckets that I like to say, which is first, comes down a lot to the candidate, your personal background, professional experience, community record, reputation, name ID, your charisma, your willingness to work hard. A lot of that is the most central thing about it's who the candidate is, right? And people's connection to them, their experience in the community, whether people like them or not, et cetera. You as the candidate is probably the most important thing in terms of whether or not you can win. And again, and if you're not willing to do the work, if you're not willing to fight hard, all of that comes down to the candidate. But it's not just the candidate. It's also the campaign organization. Do you have the financial resources that you need to reach voters? Do you have a strong team with committed volunteers? Do you have a plan to win that's well executed? So you also need the team and to be organized. And then, and this part gets often missed, is the message. Do you have a compelling message that wins voters? And having a well-developed policy that convinces voters, right? So it's not just a matter of we have a candidate who's likable, who has a strong team. You need a strong why. But why vote for this person? Why are they going to make a difference, right? And then the last part, and I know that this can seem a little weird or a little residual, is kind of everything else, which is to say, typically, right, the opponent. It makes a difference who the opponent is. If it's an open seat, if it's an incumbent, as a challenger, people are going to weigh you differently than if it was an open seat. The national political climate, there's no way around it. The national political climate drives voter turnout. It drives the mood of the electorate, the economy, how people are feeling if they're in an anti-incumbent mood. Sometimes those things just out the gate are going to decide the election from the beginning. And sometimes that means that it's more wind in your sails, or you're trying to swim upstream or against the current, if I'm getting the analogy wrong. So this year is, knock on wood, going to be hopefully a good year for Democrats, as hopefully there will be a blue wave as voters come to vote against Trump and against the MAGA Republicans. And so running as a Democrat, that national political climate can hopefully bring out more Democrats, which means just on that, regardless of you as the individual candidate, regardless of your campaign, that can help lift all boats of Democrats up and down the ticket. Whereas if you were running in a year where that's not the case, that puts you at a different sort of analysis in terms of your ability to benefit in the campaign from those kind of the national political climate. So many things that decide the viability of a campaign are sometimes even beyond the candidate or the campaign themselves. And it's really more a matter of you as a candidate being aware of that, analyzing that, and understanding how you fit into it and how you could try to ride the wave of a blue wave, or how you can mitigate the challenges of a red wave year, or other factors like that, or how people are feeling about the economy and how that informs your messaging. Or if people are in an anti-incumbent mood, how do you take that to your advantage as a challenger? Or how do you defend against that as an incumbent, etc. So what I like to say is you have to work backwards. And so Bill Camp, very beloved and respected labor leader who is no longer with us, often would say all that counts is the count, right? So it comes down to the math of getting the number of votes that you need to win. That's the fundamental of what you're working towards in a campaign. And you need to calculate your win number. And that's the number of votes you need to win and working backwards on planning how to get there. So the basic way to approach it is find the total number of registered voters in your district, figure out what the voter turnout has been during the past 3 similar elections, multiply the likely turnout against the number of registered voters, and multiply by 50% and add 1. Pretty simple. So this is an older one from Elk Grove. This was citywide at the time. Registered voters, 94,000. In the last three presidential general elections, what the turnout was on average. And so the expected turnout was around 72,000. The win number was therefore around 36,000 votes. Now, this number is likely higher than the true number just because for local office, there tends to be an undervote. Voters who, let's say, vote for president or governor, but then don't vote for local office. And that can range from a low of 10% to a high of 25%. So you usually have to account for that. But that's the number of votes that you need to win or that you should aim for. Now that you know that, what's your plan to achieve the number of votes? You need to have a plan. And it's often said that if you can't explain what your plan to win is, you don't have one. So you need to be able to explain how you plan to run a campaign to win. So you want to look at what your targeted universe is of voters to contact. This is more than just the win number, right? But is it Democratic voters? Is it voters who vote 3 out of the last 5 elections? Is it women of this age? Is it Latino voters? What are the voter constituencies that will be part of the voter universe, and how will you contact them to reach your win number in order to succeed? The plan should be accompanied by a timeline of when those contacts will be made and the budget of how much it will cost. And you'll need to account for both volunteered and any paid program if you have it, since it's unlikely that you'll be able to do all your voter contact just with volunteers if it's a large district. So these are some of the tactics in your plan to think through. Direct voter contact is always the strongest. Door-to-door canvassing, phone banking, text banking, having paid media, traditionally direct mail, but this is super expensive, having digital ads and print ads. But there's other ways that are less standard than these, which is having earned media, such as interviews with local news stations, social media presence, in-person appearances, such as doing house parties and meet and greets, attending candidates forums, tabling, and other things such as lawn signs, robocalling, TV ads. But really the bread and butter of any campaign is direct voter contact, door-to-door canvassing, phone banking, text banking, and other paid media ads. Now, these numbers, again, are probably varied. I don't know what all the most current numbers are, but I have updated this a little bit, is you need to then cost out your plan. To reach those voters using those methods, how much is it going to cost to send mailers, to do text banking, to do handwritten postcards, to do mass emails, to do robocalling? I mean, this is just one list of some of these things. And it can be expensive, and it can cost a lot. Now, if you're also having a paid program, what are you paying canvassers or phone bankers for? And at the very least, you'd have to be really paying them the minimum wage. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then here are kind of the different sort of approaches in terms of voter contact and the different ways to approach sort of what the objective is in reaching voters. And again, not going to go through all the details here, but identification is more just understanding kind of where are voters as their starting point. Folks who already support me because they're a Democrat, I'm a Democrat, they're going to support the Democrat. Someone who's already against me because they've already committed to my opponent, and so I'm not going to waste any further resources trying to contact them. Someone who's already supporting me because they're a Democrat who votes for Democrats, not going to waste any more time contacting them other than just to make sure that they vote. But I'm identifying, but then these voters are undecided. So those are the folks that we need to spend more time and resources contacting to persuade them. So identification is kind of the first pass of understanding where are voters in terms of, are they already with me? Are they already against me? Or are they kind of in the middle, undecided? Then the next step is putting your most time and resources in investing in persuasion of the voters who are undecided but persuadable. And so that's where you spent the most amount of resources and time trying to win over those voters with your message, with your voter contact, and trying to hopefully eventually ID them as a supporter. GOTV, get out the vote, typically in the month or so before election day now, is when you're focusing primarily on those who you've already ID'd as being supporters or had persuaded to become supporters, and ensuring that they follow through and actually cast their vote. So these are different methods in terms of sort of your goals in voter contact. This is a helpful tool from the LGBT Victory Fund of kind of explaining how you sort of prioritize targeting of voters. This is a little difficult for a local race because it's nonpartisan, and also because you might be running against another Democrat. But really basically thinking about it this way, about how likely is someone to vote, and are they with you, are they against you, or are they persuadable swing voters? And therefore, how strongly do you want to put your time and resources into persuading them, or into GOTVing them to ensure that they actually follow through and vote? Um, and so here I want to put a little more emphasis on the importance of, to be successful in a campaign, it's not merely a matter of just reaching those voters and just knocking on the most doors, making the most phone calls. That's certainly important, but let's not overlook that having a persuasive message is key. And I don't remember who exactly said this. It was some political commentator years ago, but I love the line. It said, if you build a church without Jesus, all you have is an empty warehouse, which is to say, if you have the foundations and you have the structure, that's great. But if you don't have the actual reason to be there, you don't actually have the thing that gives it soul and purpose, then it's not a church, it's just an empty warehouse, right? And so similarly with a campaign, having a great campaign that's been put together in terms of its organization and structure and having people knock on doors means nothing if when you knock on that door or when you dial that voter, you don't actually have a compelling reason when you contact them of why they should vote for the candidate. So it's not just about tactics. It's not just about knocking on doors, calling voters, sending mailers. It's also having about an important, compelling reason for them to vote for you when you reach them, when you knock on that door, or they answer the phone, or they look at your mailer. So you have to have a compelling why that is both persuasive and, most importantly, contrastive. Doesn't have to mean that it's negative, but it has to contrast you from your opponents. And this is a really helpful framework to look at that, also from the LGBT Victory Fund. Your message should really be in the intersection of these three circles. What do you care about? What are your priorities? Obviously, you shouldn't be saying anything if it's not your priority, right? Why would you have a message of something that you don't care about, right? It should be something that you believe and care about, but it should also be something that the voters care about. And that can be a little tricky. You need your finger on the pulse of understanding, what do voters in your district care about? You need to talk about what you care about, but they also care about. And the third really important thing that you don't want to lose is, what contrasts you with your opponent? Something that you care about, that voters care about, that you disagree with your opponent on. That's where your message should be focused on, because that gives voters a reason to pick you and to not pick your opponent, right? Really critical. And I think a lot of candidates often struggle with this because they'll say a lot of the same generic things that for voters doesn't distinguish them from their opponents. Like, I support affordable housing. Okay, well, so does every other candidate in this race. Like, if I'm a voter saying that you support all the same generic things that every other candidate supports, doesn't really give me a reason to pick you over any of them, right? But if I say I support affordable housing and my plan is to do A, B, and C, whereas my opponent is going to do it by doing X, Y, and Z, then as a voter, I could be like, oh, well, you know what? A, B, and C is a great way of doing that. That makes a lot more sense than X, Y, and Z. You know what? I'm going to pick you, right? So make sure that it's a persuasive, contrastive message that aligns with your priorities, the voters' priorities, but shows contrast with your opponents. That's a message that's persuasive, contrastive, and compelling for voters to pick you. And that can be a little challenging. Part of that, in terms of message, is also telling your story, not only in terms of the issues that you stand for, but also telling it in a way that's effective because it compels to why you're running. And this ties back into the beginning when we were talking about being introspective and understanding why you want to run and what brought you to run. And so an effective message tells a story that's compelling. It explains to the listener why you care, what drives you, and therefore why you're running for office. Now, you do have to be a little vulnerable, since you're giving voters a window into your heart and mind. Like any good story, there's conflict and resolution or problem and solution. Common structure is setting the stage by introducing yourself, like the personal story of how you grew up, the struggles you face, how it shaped who you have become as a person, presenting the problems that you face, facing you and the listener now, and offer the solution, which is your candidacy, since you're going to resolve that problem, and then end with a call to action. Support me, or to make that a reality. Again, won't show this video just because we don't really have time for it, but an example who I think someone who did it really well when she ran years ago was Katie Valenzuela. Very compelling video that ran through sort of the personal story and what she went through growing up, and how that informed her values and why that compelled her to run and to help people, and the change that she was running for on the council. But there's so many good examples of this. But really having a compelling story is a way for voters to not only just intellectually connect with you by reading your platform or your message, but also visually and emotionally to connect and really understand, like, oh, I can trust this person because maybe even if I don't know every specific policy detail about what's happening at City Hall or on the school board or on the park board, if I can feel and understand that this person is running for the right reasons, I can trust them that they're going to have that stuff figured out. So don't underestimate the power of a compelling story that tells and shows someone why they should trust in you, not merely asserting that through a policy platform or through a bio on a website. So just some other things as well. Other ways to convey that message and that story. One of the most common historically is mailers, though they're becoming less and less common now just because they're so expensive. First, make sure any mailers that you send are union printed and have the union bug on them, which I'll cover in a moment. But the challenge is that mailers they used to be where maybe you could get them for about 50 cents per piece if you kind of save some costs. Now the minimum is like probably at least $1 to $1.50 or more. It's something to consider, but you really need to think about sort of what your budget would be. I'm not going to go through all the details because all the different steps in this kind of lays it out, and I'm happy to walk anyone through it. I've done mail before, but it's something that you probably do want to think about having in your budget as a candidate. But just to realize that they're probably becoming less effective, more expensive, and so folks have been shifting a little more towards digital, but mailers are still typically in the mix and are usually much more doable when it's a smaller office at the local level. So here's some examples from some local candidates. So on the CSD board years ago, one of our members who got elected in 2016, one of the mailers that was put together, Portia Middleton, one of our local council members. This was one that I helped design for her back in 2016, 18 when she got elected. So mailers are still important. Again, make sure as a Democrat to only use union printers. Our folks and friends in labor will look at your mailers, and if there's not a union bug on there, you will hear about it. So here are just a few of the local very common ones used. It's not a comprehensive list. There are several other ones who we have used over the years, but these are some of the most common locally in Sacramento. And always ask them to include the union bug. Don't just assume that they'll add it, because many times these union print shops have non-political clients who aren't asking for the union bug, so they won't always assume to put it on. So just make sure to ask them to add it. And then just some of the last few slides here, and again, I'll try to finish this up soon, is again, really digital is becoming more and more a thing. It definitely has become one of the primary ways that candidates are reaching voters over the past few years. Make sure you use social media. It's a much more affordable medium than direct mail, reaches a wide audience at very little cost, but it's less targeted for sure. The takeaways that I would say is really make sure to use images. Don't just post text, since that's less engaging, gets less views. Have consistent social media handles across platforms. Share content across platforms. Don't just automatically copy and paste, but adjust according to the platform. And you can target social media users according to their zip code or other targeted demographics. So you can also be a little more targeted. Just some pro tips. Try to create all your graphics, or whoever it is on your team, your kitchen cabinet who's in charge of their graphics, have them do it as early as possible, at least a month or two before the election, so that you can have kind of a schedule of it already planned out and all the graphics created. so that you could just roll them out quickly without having to do that work during the height of campaign season. And also keep in mind that some platforms, such as Facebook, do require pre-approval to post political ads, and it could take up to a week or more to get approved. So don't wait until the height of election season to do that. Do it quickly, or do it early, so that you can roll things out quickly. Here's an example, again, when I ran in Elk Grove years ago, where I made a little graphic and of like, find me on the ballot here, and vote by mail by November 6th. And this was shared out on social media and was targeted to voters in the district in Elk Grove that I was running in. And of course, I whited out a little bit of my opponent's name so the name wouldn't be as easily visible, because I didn't want to promote my opponent. And then also on social media, make sure to take advantage of uploading videos. Again, graphic content, but also videos are much more compelling and get much more engagement. And so even a simple video that you can just do on your smartphone can reach a wide range of voters. Of course, it's always great to have a very well-produced video, but that can be prohibitively expensive. Even the most basic candidate with the most basic limited budget, if you just have a smartphone, you can just do a recording, maybe add your name at the bottom, and that's all you need. But it gets so much more engagement. Voters see it, they hear from you, and they're much more likely to engage with it. This was a video that I helped Jacqueline Moreno when she ran for Casumnes CSD in Elk Grove. I literally shot it on my iPhone and uploaded it, and it got tons of views and engagement on social media. And so just the last part here is really just stay focused. Campaigning, it's hard, exhausting, takes a toll from you, but it too shall pass. And really, you need to keep going steady until election day. You don't want to lose a very close race and look back wishing, oh, if only I had canvassed on that day I took off or something. And oftentimes candidates do get to a point where they're like, you know what, I just want this to be done, win or lose, I'm indifferent. It's okay. It's okay to feel that way. Times it gets tough and towards the end of the election cycle. But regardless of the outcome, it's important to take some time off to relax and decompress after the election. And win or lose, always show gratitude to everyone who helped you and believed in you. Thank them. Thank your volunteers multiple times. If you lose, do the gracious thing and call your opponent to congratulate them on their victory. Remember, politics is a long-term game, and just you want to make sure that you're respectful, and do the honorable thing and call and congratulate them. And so just the last part here, just to end, is just the planning ahead of, well, if you're thinking about running in the future, what do I do now? And I would just say, really get involved. If you're thinking about running for office, the thing is, if you just wake up one day and you have not been involved in the community and you're like, I'm going to run for Congress today, probably not going to be successful, right? You want to start early in terms of being involved in the community, and build connections, build relationships, build understanding with what the issues are, because that will inform whether you want to run for office, whether you should run for office, and it will make you much more viable in terms of the folks in the community having seen your record, seen your involvement, and seeing you as someone who is a leader who folks want to advance into elected leadership. So some ways of getting involved to sort of begin that journey is serve on a local board or commission. Great way to gain experience, build your name ID, foster relationships. We have a link here to the Sac County list of board and commission vacancies. But if in your city, there may be boards and commission vacancies in your city. School boards sometimes have certain boards or commissions or committees. Same with special districts. School boards and special districts tend to have less options because they're a little more focused on particular things, but there are always such opportunities available. So a really great way to get your foot in the door. Organize around an issue locally in your community. Be a voice for an issue or cause in your community. It shows that you're a leader, that you are motivated by doing good in your community, and you build strong relationships along the way. Get to know your local leaders and build relationships with them. So if you don't know your local elected officials, meet them. Meet the leaders in your community, offer to work with them on good causes, and be visible so that they take notice that you're eager to serve. So when there's an opening on a board or commission, they may want to appoint you. When you want to run for office, they may want to support you because they've seen that you've been active and visible in the community. So again, just the pro tip, don't just get involved in your community when you're running for office. People see right through that. Be involved because you want to be involved, and be involved long before you decide to run. That's going to set you up not only to just be a good active citizen in your community, but also if and when you do decide to run, you actually are running with connections, with experience, with grasp of the issues. That's going to put you in so much better a position to actually be successful as a candidate and also to be more successful as an elected official. So really important to get involved and get involved early. And then lastly, just some further pro tips, don't burn bridges. Politics and campaigns are all about relationships and working with other people. Your enemy today may be your ally tomorrow. So, want to make sure that you can foster positive relationships, don't burn bridges, and remember that it's always the long-term game. But to thine own self be true. Don't pretend to be something you're not just because you think it might help you politically. People will respect you if you stand up for your values, even when it's unpopular to do so. And so sometimes that can be tough as a Democrat if you live in a very red or purple area of the county. Don't pretend to be a Republican or pretend to be conservative or pretend not to be as progressive as you are just because the folks around you maybe don't align 100% with you all the time. People actually respect it more when you show conviction and you show willingness to maybe sometimes speak up and be a little unpopular on this issue or that issue because you stand by the values that you believe in. And also, if you try to be something that you're not, folks do tend to see through that. And I do have to say, don't endorse Republicans if you plan on running as a Democrat. Support other Democrats and don't endorse Republicans, since that runs counter to your political values and will likely hurt you politically in the future. When Democrats come seeking our support, but they've been supporting Republicans against Democrats for years, we're like, hey, we can't really support you if you're out here supporting Republicans over Democrats. So if you want to run and get Democratic support, make sure that you're supporting other Democrats and helping lift all Democratic votes around us. And not helping Republicans against Democrats. And so the last slide here is take advantage of other trainings on how to run for office. I've been through some of these trainings. I've been through the Victory Fund. I even got to attend a one-day Emerge training that was open to all genders. But there are trainings such as these that are targeted to help women or queer folks or folks of whatever it may be. That are lots of trainings out there for folks who are interested in running for office. So this training today has just been kind of, again, a very general, quick overview. I know it wasn't as quick as I hoped it would be, but it's meant to be a pretty wide overview of the different things to think about in running specifically for local office. These trainings and trainings like these tend to focus a little more higher level, less in the mechanics, but they're great resources, and I would definitely encourage folks to pursue other trainings such as this to get a broader array of knowledge. The California Democratic Party is also often puts trainings like this together, and happy to share those out. And so with that, that concludes this training, and happy to answer any questions. And if folks don't have any questions exactly right now, also happy to speak with folks or answer any questions offline. Feel free to email me, call, text, etc. Depending on how busy my schedule is, I might not always be able to respond right away, but I will get back to you eventually. But happy to help.
So one more thing. So along with not endorsing Republicans, don't donate to their campaign either. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you, Andres.
Thank you, Lee.
So if you want to raise your hands, if you have any questions or throw them into the chat, we'll take questions now. Anybody? Okay. So again.
Jason has a question.
Oh.
Yeah, I was raising my hand. Couldn't find the button on my computer. I was like, ah. So this is not a question about the presentation, although a great presentation. I was taking notes off camera. The new, what is it, Three Rivers Democrats, what part of that's in Rancho Cordova, right?
Well, some of it's in Rancho Cordova, Vineyard, Rosemont area, Galt. We have some members from Galt,
Okay.
Vintage Park.
Yeah, because I'm in Rancho, and I was just like, is that mine?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's part of it. There's also American River Dams. And they cover a lot of Rancho Cordova also. Most of our club is unincorporated.
Oh, okay. See, I should see about the American River dams. I used to work along the American River for about 15 years
Okay,
as an outdoor educator for fish and wildlife. So
cool.
I've seen like everybody's kid for the last 15 years when they're in elementary